Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for being here. I'm Jean-Paul Chapelle from France Television, and I have the pleasure and the good fortune of moderating this conference on the theme of Is anyone still finding meaning in their work? To answer this question, we have a panel of top quality participants. I'm going to introduce them to you. I'm going to start with Alexandra Roulet, who is a professor at INSEAD and a member of the Cercle économistes. And she has prepared this round table. I'm going to ask her that question first of all, and so you'll see her frame of mind. So, Alexandra, if I say to you, work, are you fulfilled in your work? Yes, I am. Well, thank you for that answer. Moving on to Jennifer Hunt, Professor of Economics at Rutgers University in the United States. Same question to you. Are you fulfilled in your work? Absolutely. Moving on to Johan LINDHOLM, who is president of the Swedish Trade Union Confederation. Johan will answer in English, but he will be interpreted into French. Are you fulfilled in your work?
Of course, I'm very delighted to be here.
Ça veut dire bien sûr, si j'ai bien compris.
Very good. I presume he said he's very satisfied, says the moderator. Okay, now let's move on to Thierry DEREZ. Are you fulfilled in your work? Can you repeat the question? Yes, of course I am fulfilled. Cédric DUFOUR, CEO of Rakuten in France and Rakuten TV, same question to you. Are you fulfilled by your work? Oh, more than ever. And Loïc, SOUBEYRAND, founder and chief executive officer of Swile. We'll learn later on what Swile is. This is a small business bound to become very, very big. Are you already fulfilled in your work? Of course I am. And because you in the room have done us the honor of being here, raise your hand if you are fulfilled in your work. And those of you who are not fulfilled, you can raise your hand if you're not fulfilled in your work. Oh yes, I saw it. Well, not very many people are admitting to that. Oh, there are a few shy hands being raised there. So without further ado, each person has 5 minutes so that afterwards we have enough time to talk together and to talk with our audience. I'm going to hand the floor to Alexandra Roulet. Thank you, Jean-Paul. So to open this session, I would like to give you some statistics from an IFOP survey in 2022 that showed that in 1990, 60% of the French considered that their work was very important in their life. In 2022, some 30 years later, that figure had melted to 21%, so from 60 to 21% in the same time. Family had gone down in importance, but was still important for 61%, and leisure has increased. It's become important for 40% of the French people. So the figures have created quite a lot of discussion because European surveys on values show a different picture. The French always consider workers being important in their work in a European survey, and there are more French people who say that it is important than other Europeans. But on a European scale, although the French are saying that work is important, they are also the population who say most frequently that they would like work to take up less space in their life. It can sound like a bit of a paradox. So it's important, but we wish it wasn't quite so important, perhaps. So all of these figures from different surveys are not necessarily so paradoxical or incoherent, but what they are portraying is the fact that that work is no longer as central to people in their lives. And people in the IFOP survey, for example, some French people were saying that work wasn't important. It's not because it's not important per se, but it's just quite important. So it does chime in with the fact that yes, work is important, but that's not all there is to life. There are other aspects to life which are very important as well. they want to fulfill themselves in other areas of their life, and they want to better organize the work and personal life. And so I believe the important thing here is not necessarily the moral judgment on this change. I don't think you should say that people are no longer have that taste to provide effort. No, I think that the importance given to work is same from one age group to another. There are some differences, and the figures are quite similar from different job categories. It's more interesting to look at these changes in the subjective approach to work and compare that with the objective contours of the labour market over the past 30 years. Well, it's difficult to sum up everything in a minute, but we can say two things. The first thing is that over the last 30 years, for those people who are less qualified, they work 40% hours less because they are part-timers or they are unemployed, not necessarily by choice. So if you look at the long term, the trajectories could come to a more unexpected halt. And there is a perception that it is harder to go up the social ladder through work, and remuneration is not as dynamic as it used to be. That's what people feel. That's due to globalization and political choices, economic choices, etc. But I think that the reason, well, people are frustrated when they see all of this, when they see this in the electoral results. We see people very annoyed and upset. And it's also translated into the importance given to work. And people who are not necessarily satisfied by their work will decide to put their energies elsewhere. And the final point, I would say that these changes are not only regrettable, because sometimes we can see the reflect of some social enhancements. For example, the better distribution of household tasks between men and women. If you look over the long term, the men didn't ever used to do any housework, although women do continue to do more household tasks, look after the children or the elderly, for example, more than the men. The men do join in a little bit more with the household tasks. So they're investing not only at work, but also in the home a little bit more. So that reflects social progress. Well done. I think you respected your time slot, your 5 minutes there. Thank you very much, Alexandra. Now let's move on to Jennifer Hunt. I'm challenging you to respect the 5-minute window. Well, I will follow on from Alexandra Roulet and say the hours that are worked and fulfillment at work. But I'm going to speak from the German point of view because I'm more familiar with that. Over the decades, in Germany as in France, the working week has shortened, apart from older women who didn't work as much to begin with. And furthermore, wished working hours over the past 20 years are going down even faster than that. And so these wished working hours correspond to a change in the work environment. What we see in the German data is that there is a steep decrease in the valorization of the money that you earn when you work. Now, does that mean that people are less fulfilled? I don't think so. But you may not agree with me. In my opinion, when you're talking about fulfillment, it's not necessarily earning a lot of money. There are different aspects of work that can fulfill you. But as far as giving value to these other aspects, there's very little change over time. So it's quite possible that reducing the number of working hours may have a link with how, with money being seen as less important. Well, what I have done is to analyze the link between workers' satisfaction with their work and satisfaction with life. And so there's a scale of answers. And so this link reflects how fulfilled people are at work. And have I found that work is a key element in self-fulfillment? Well, as Professor Roulet mentioned, it's just one factor among other factors. If we answer this question of satisfaction at work with 1 point plus in general, or 0.3 when you're 0.3% when you're talking about satisfaction with life. However, part of work reflects how much value you set on money. If you try to gauge how much what's the most important thing to these workers? Family, health, and work and personal revenue are more or less equal. Less important is satisfaction with your housing and with your leisure activities. So the link between satisfaction at work has gone up over the past 20 years. However, it has been driven by increase of satisfaction with personal revenue. Given that, satisfaction with work has gone down a little bit, per se. When you see the satisfaction between work and life, the link weakens because the link between satisfaction of life and personal revenue has gone down also. So the value of money goes down, the value of other aspects of work only goes down slightly. When the value of money goes down, that could explain why the number of hours worked goes down, or the wished number of hours worked goes down. And the other aspects of work seem less important. Johan LINDHOLM, your turn.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, of course. As this seminar suggests that work matters less to people today, I actually want to give a little bit more balanced view of this, of course. Yes, fewer people, both in France and Sweden, say work is very important in service, but that doesn't mean work is less important. Depending on how the question is asked, you get different answers. In the past, men were, as we heard, often the sole providers. It might have given work a more central role in society, but as society changed, so do also the answers. Today, more women are in the workforce. Women may, on average, place more value on family and spare time, so the numbers here shift, of course. At the same time, men today are more equal in their sharing of tasks at home. That's, of course, a good thing. If people value family more, it might show progress and equality, not a loss of work ethic. According to 2024 survey by the Swedish Work Environment Authority, 84% consider their work to be interesting and stimulating, and 89% find their work meaningful. Women are more likely than men to preserve their work as meaningful, as women more often work professions involving direct contact with people. Among younger workers, a greater proportion feel that their work is neither interesting nor stimulating. It's the same applies to their sense of meaning, and it's also more common for younger individuals in the labor market to suffer work-related injuries. Despite the statistics indicating that most people enjoy their jobs and find them meaningful, there are significant work environment issues within blue-collar professions that must be addressed to ensure a sustainable working life up to retirement. Excessive workloads due to streamlined organization, hiring freezes that results in people working while ill, and tight deadlines in sectors such as construction, which can lead to increased injuries and fatal accidents. And that are just some of the challenges that need to urgent attention. Another reason for this shift is that many jobs today are less secure, even precarious sometimes. Workers are being exploited and sometimes treated as if they were commodities. In the past, employers often cared for their workers. Now we see more insecure jobs, gig works, and part-time roles that people don't choose. In Sweden, many want full-time, permanent jobs, but don't get them. I don't know how exactly this problem exists, if it exists here in France too, but this is an important issue that should be fixed. Job security and good working conditions also affect how people feel about work and how they respond to service. The real issue is that people care less about work, isn't that employers and society don't value workers enough. Employers must ensure workers have decent working conditions, fair pay, and chances to grow, to get upskilling and reskilling when needed, instead of being laid off. I think it's very important to make sure that workers have the possibility to reskilling and upskilling in times of rapidly evolving labor market. Society also needs to support workers and evaluate the job to do with good schools, healthcare, public transports, and help if someone loses their job. Pension, of course, must ensure a decent standing of living. If society fails and no one values your work, it's harder to feel proud of what you do. If your salary isn't enough to pay your bills every month, it's hard to feel that your work is meaningful to you. Wages have not increased and the systems have not taken care of them in a good way. They can't afford to become sick, send their children to good school, etc. If we fail to ensure that social development is fair and just towards those who actually work, we risk a dangerous increase in popularization and populism. Okay, I have a few more words. We need a society where working people can't afford to be ill, retire, take time off, and enjoy good quality life. It is extremely important to avoid the kind of development with consequences we are currently witnessing in the United States. That's where American workers have been neglected for years.
Merci.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Thank you very much. Thierry, your turn. First of all, I would like to reassure everybody, when you are on stage and you do not respect the stop sign, you will not have any points taken off your driving license. Now, I'd just like to talk about one point. Being fulfilled at work is a cultural phenomenon. Indeed. For most of us in this room, we are mammals. Most of us. That means that we have hot blood. That also means that we want to do as little as possible. I'm sure you all know Marshall Salin's work on how primitive people organize themselves. I'm just going to run over this briefly so that I don't get shown the stop sign. Our nomadic primitive ancestors would spend approximately 3 to 4 hours per day just surviving. That means if you add 8 hours for sleep, they had 12 hours ahead of them each day to do what mammals like doing best, i.e. nothing. If you are not convinced about this, I would invite you to watch documentaries that are broadcast very regularly. Look at a pack of lions, and you'll see how the king of the mammals spends his time, a bit of work and a lot of leisure. And the males rest up more than the females, and I'm going to stop the comparison there with between lions and humans. So, getting fulfilled in work means adhering to a value set which is work, and it's obviously a cultural phenomenon. We have been taught that work, in particular work well done, is a value. But when one notes that this is a cultural phenomenon, and you note at the same time that this culture is not being maintained, because we've been saying for many years now that work is not really wonderful, it's not really sacred anymore, then we've got this contradiction. On the one hand, we've got our deep nature as mammals, and on the other hand, we have a culture which we think is perhaps running out of steam, or it might have disappeared for some people. The generation that did May 1968 is saving their money. Those who wrote under the all about those times and saying it's banned from banning, these are the best savers that we have, money savers. It's a bit of a paradox there, isn't it? Possibly. But it means that values in society can change, and that they do change. The question that is begged today to all of us here up on the stage is, what has changed? And how do we intend or not intend to reinstate this notion of fulfillment at work? You are fulfilled when you're in harmony with your values. If work is not a value, it's no longer a value, never was a value, well, then this is a bit of lure. One might be wondering if we're all being duped by this. And we're being exploited, perhaps. What justified this illusion? Is this an illusion or not? So why is work a value? And if we ask that question, we'll get some more satisfactory answers, not only for the younger generations. I'm not convinced that this conflict has the younger generation versus the older generations. I'm not convinced by that. I think that apathy towards work is the same, only the way that we express ourselves and the different expectations are different. And to understand these different expectations, one has to question the cultural roots of work. And I'm done. Thank you very much. Cédric DUFOUR. Yes, now I'm going to start by commenting on this libel. Who is still getting fulfilled in their work? That suggests that people are no longer being fulfilled, but people used to get fulfilled with their work. I think that increasingly people are being fulfilled in work so long as the conditions are right, and it's up to us managers to make sure that those conditions are there. It's true that people, particularly youngsters, want to be fulfilled in their work. And that was not the case in the past. I think I started at the age of 30 when I went to work, and I didn't wonder about whether I was going to be fulfilled or happy at work. I was just glad to have a job with a good wage. And these questions of happiness at work just wasn't on the table at the time. Then later on we had the Y generation, Generation Z, with its search for meaning. And today happiness at work is absolutely key. There's a Science Pool survey which said that a good percentage of students think that being happy at work is more important than the wage that they earn. And so people who work in different companies have certain needs. And today, it's something we have to take into account when you're in a management position. And that's all well and good, because a happy worker is a more efficient worker, works better. We know that the cost of disengagement, we remember in 2021 there were 50 million employees who left their jobs. And then on the other end of the scale, an MIT Harvard survey said that a happy worker is a worker that is 31% more productive and 55% more creative than the others. So it really is virtuous for employers to have employees who are fulfilled at work. But it doesn't happen overnight. You can't just say, yes, my workers are happy. You have to action a certain number of levers to make sure that it works. And I've got 4 levers which spring to mind. The first one, to find meaning in your work, then society has to have meaning. Society hasn't got to be hollow. And society has to have some values. Let me give you an example of this company, Rakuten, which I'm at the head of. It's an e-trading platform. We could simply just do e-trading, but we do more than that. We have many convictions. Purchasing power, which is why we've introduced a generous cashback program. We are also committed to the need to work on the circular economy, hence a presence on our website of new products and also second-hand products. We are also keen on digitization of our transactions, which is why we're only a marketplace. And all of these values, all of these convictions, are written up on the walls of our company, and they echo with the group's morals. We are a Japanese group, and in Japan they have the shui, which are the classical principles and values of the company or the group, and that is really important when we're trying to attract recruits and to keep them with us. So the role number 1 is to give meaning. So the company itself has to have meaning. Second lever is autonomy. We have to trust our employees. When we recruit people because they are intelligent, because they've got good personality, they've got good background, and so we have to then let them express themselves and let their qualities speak out. It's so very important that people can be fulfilled to have this room for maneuver.
Third lever is, what is my third level? You have 1 minute to find the third level. The third lever is the salary, the wage. Well, no, third lever is creativity. It's not always obvious to think about it, because even you have to value creativity and encourage it and promote it. And it's at the day and age of AI, where a lot of tasks are going to be automated. It remains a very important way to retain our employees. So yes, we're trying to have fun more and more at work. It's fun for the employees, but it also serves the interest of the company. Thank you very much. So we're going to conclude this first roundtable with Loïc SOUBEYRAND, who's the founder and CEO of Swile. I didn't say what Swile, so maybe you can tell us more about it. So Swile. It's you give like restaurant vouchers. Yes, the point is to have on one card, one app, all your restaurant checks, vouchers, all your business trips, all the money you can spend when you travel for work. And M from Smile is turned into a W for Swile, for a W. So I'm going to start with my introduction words, by saying that we are very lucky in this room because you opened the session by asking who's enjoying their life at work, and most of the room raised their hands, so and the panelists as well, so that's good news. And my deep conviction is that we're very lucky because we are some kind of an island in the middle of a huge ocean of people who are not at all happy in the workplace. So we should congratulate each other for that, and let's celebrate it. Second reason why we're very lucky is usually we have panels that are always agreeing among themselves. And I heard very distinct views and people are not agreeing at all. So we can have a great debate to follow. What does it mean to be fulfilled at the workplace? It doesn't question the commitments. We talk a lot about commitment at work, but you can be committed at work and still not enjoying it. You could be liking your job and not at all finding yourself like you're achieving what you want. So the notion of achievement is really to become what you are. So what you are is getting to the reason for being, and the being what we are is the fulfillment of oneself, is the journey towards being yourself. So how am I going to be fully who I am? So this journey, by essence, is very rare. You have just to look at the famous pyramid of Maslow. Everybody, most of you know it, it's the last level on this pyramid. So if there's a pyramid, it means that, socially speaking, those who manage to get to the last level of the pyramid, they're very rare. And to achieve myself, I need to do what I like. I need to be good at what I do, and it needs to really evoke a really deep sense of who I am inside of me. We don't talk about social status, richness. No. We're talking about internal richness, your internal soul. So this is very difficult to find and to know. If on top of this, we need to do that through work, and that shows how difficult it is that the Mont Blanc turns into the Everest in a few seconds. Because doing this through work, it means that you need to find something that I like to do and that I am paid for. Wow. So the top of the pyramid already is sharp, but it's even sharper now as soon as you try to go through this journey. It's a very dangerous and tricky journey. But let's admit that you find this alpinist who can climb the north face of the Everest without any oxygen, and you're not still immune to the fact that somebody's going to push you out in the middle, down the slope, because even if you combine all these conditions, your desire to work can get you out of this journey. So we can see it with jobs, like nurses. People are really a very strong vocational aspiration to work. I love my job. I am really good at what I'm doing, and they have a very deep belief of doing what they're doing for work. And yet, I am either facing with a very toxic manager, or I am submitted to absurdity, or I am facing a completely stupid bureaucracy. And some people, even though they love the essence of their job, they get out of the job because of the concrete reality of the workplace. So the achievement of oneself with work or at work or through work, I believe in it. But I do believe that it's only limited to a very small part of the population and the part of the population that has a control over its private life. So very often the people who raise their hands are entrepreneurs or those that are not submitted to an environment that surround them and that could make them drop out. Thank you very much, and thank you for keeping up to the time limit. And since you are the one who assumes not to be in agreement with anybody else, I'm going to ask you what shocks you the more in the other speeches, or the word that you agree the least with. Maybe that's my, it's hard for me because I'm taking risks because these are clients and they're happy clients on top of it. They were, they're not anymore probably, no. No, it was just to question the difference. It's not that I don't agree, it's that I question the difference between commitment and achievement. So for you, what is commitment and it was achievement? Committed to being committed means I like what I'm doing, I like my peers, I'm happy with them, I don't have any toxic manager. Everything that I do, I feel like I'm making an impact in what I do. However, I am not, it doesn't trigger inside of me a deep need to achieve myself, fulfill myself. Do we all agree with that, or are there some people who strongly disagree? Yes, no, otherwise I move on to the next question. I feel like we have talked about a few ideas of commitment and achievement, but when I hear you, or at least when I don't hear you speaking about those who make a good living and those who don't, who are struggling financially, maybe we're not addressing the question, which is it's easier to fulfill yourself if you have a certain wage, a certain income, and you can choose. Does anybody agree with me on that? Alexandra, come close to the mic. Yeah. In the surveys that I was mentioning earlier on, something to note is the difference between social professional categories and not as marked as we can suspect. For example, this IFOP survey of 2022 asking people if is work important for you in your life. It's very important for, from what I remember, 18% of workers and employees, and very important for 25% of managers. So there's a difference, but it's not a huge it's not a huge one. It doesn't mean that the reasons between those differences are the same. I believe that the reality of the job market is harder for the categories that are less qualified, and that can explain that they invest themselves in other things, versus for managers, I think there are more it triggers different things. The fact that they're super connected and it can have burnout, and that can also induce some of the people to try to realize themselves in other fields of life. But there are no real gaps, as big gaps as we can imagine. But we can question the question of the employment, the job that is that you're just accepting, and the job that you're choosing. Yes, the wage is an important factor, but not the same. I told that there's a survey every year to follow the level of commitment, satisfaction, realization, but not only because it's a little phrased a little differently. And we also work to improve it. And we realize that when we put in place a number of actions, we have a commitment that is getting better, satisfaction that is increasing, even though the wage don't increase. So there are not that many levers that can be put in place except for the wage. Thierry, DEREZ, you wanted to say something? Yes, simply the relationship to wage is very different from one country to the next. Either if you're in France or, for example, in Anglo-Saxon countries, the narrative going all the way to the secrets, not to disclose your salary in France. It's well protected except for the major leaders. We don't want to talk about it, and we don't want to put it on the table. In the US, the first thing that people tell you that you can find out about somebody that you meet is how much do you make. So if we consider this realization, I understand that wages are important, and I'm an insurer, so I need to encompass everyone. And the fulfillment is not necessarily linked to the activity that you have, but let's remember that there's a very big French hypocrisy on wages, on how much you make. We're in Aix-en-Provence. We're still in France. I believe that in France, we're not far from being ripe. Like there's the feeling of the temperature, but there's also the feeling of the wage that you're getting. You're feeling cool, you're feeling good, you know. How do you feel? How does everybody feel about the temperature? I would say that thanks to all the efforts being made, the general feeling is quite good. But let's say that we drop by 4 or 5 degrees, 4 or 5 degrees less, I think the feeling will be more diverse, will vary from one to the other. It's the same for the wages in France. So I deliver to the economists the possibility to do works on the wage as they are being felt. I went around the table, so I'm okay. And what does your neighbor, Johan Linden, think about it? You want to say something about it?
I think a little bit we missed something also, but I think the injustice in the society is total. I talked about the blue-collar workers, we have the business life, we have the white collars, and we have not the same opportunities nowadays, I think. And I think that is very something to take really care of, because if one part of the society goes one direction and the workers go in another direction, you have establishment condemned, you have politician condemned, and that's at least what's happening in Sweden. I meet them on my site visits, that's a big society problem in Sweden, because they have their own solutions. So yeah, I can stop there.
Thank you.
If Jennifer does not want to add something, we can then move on to the questions with the room, if you'll agree. And so I give you the floor, and I see somebody who looks a bit younger than the average people on the stage. So please introduce yourself, and two, phrase a short question, please. And speak close to the Gabriel 2022. I'm a student in economy. I'd like to add something you said, Alexandra, on the importance of work. You said that workers and social categories, higher social categories, take work differently, but it doesn't mean that they don't fulfill themselves in the same way at work. We can say that the blue-collar workers have a very high value of their job, but they cannot satisfy. Do you agree with it? Which would mean that despite the survey, there are some sociological differences in the fulfillment of a person at work. Yes, the idea to say there's no difference between blue-collar workers and white collars, it's not, I'm a bit suspicious of it, but I still believe that an employee, a blue-collar, can have a feeling of fulfillment because he offered a job well done, that, you know, that is gratifying. But the reality of the job market for the people who have less diploma is getting more and more difficult, because of the technological progress, because of globalization, which means that the demand in work has changed, and there's a reality that is less easy for everyone, and the different types of contracts. But on the real idea of pleasure found in doing your job well, I don't think there may be some differences between the groups, but it's not a fatality. Very good. Another question in the room, if we have a second one. Yes, of course. I'll ask you to speak close to the mic, introduce yourself quickly, and to ask a quick question. Priscilla Cornell, I'm an economist. I have a question. What share do you bring to the exercise of individual will in the fulfillment of oneself in your life in general and in work in particular? This is an interesting question. Who feels up for it? Thierry DEREZ? You know, one of the major enemies of philosophy is that the concept of will did not exist in ancient Greece. They invented so many other things that we feel like they invented everything. However, this idea of will, it didn't exist implemented at all in Greek philosophy. Why am I bringing this up in relation to your question? Is because will, our will, I believe that you have to admit, is shaped by our environment. We are a political being, a social being. What we want is, for the major part, what we've learned to want, or what we didn't want because we were taught to stop wanting it. But between those two directions, you remain in the field of culture. And that's why I mentioned early on that feeling fulfilled at work has a cultural dimension. You're too young to have known this time, but I can tell you there was time where the earth would produce by itself the resources that men need. One day, one or the other, I don't know who, somebody made a mistake and we got banned and we won our bread by hard work. So you can see that at some times in civilization, work not only is not a vector of achievement, but is a punishment. So either you're in a culture that considers that, as we did recently, since I would say the end of the Middle Age, that work is an offering to God, and as such it valorizes the human being and it allows the human being to achieve himself. You have a civilization where work is valued. But if you, in a society where this has disappeared, it is much harder to make work a value, because it becomes more abstract. Does somebody else have a question despite the heat? The gentleman, please raise your hand. Yes, you have the floor. Lenny, 22, I'm a medical student. Thank you for coming here. I have a question. Are some trade unions different than the bosses' unions? Are there some strong ones? And are they necessary to negotiate some benefits and to help the workers to fully enjoy their life in the workplace? Thank you for your question. So should we just talk about France? Maybe because we have a Swedish person with us and an American as well. So maybe you're going to give the floor to the American. So how do you portray the trade unions in France? It wasn't really the question that he asked. That's how I understood it. Trade unions in France are very weird because there are very few members to trade unions, and that's unique in countries that I know. But so it's hard to, I was going to talk about countries where the trade unions are in decline, but in France it's difficult to know because there are very few members to a trade union. In countries where the trade unions can get weaker, particularly the United States, we find that inequality has increased. And the only doubt is that where's the cause? The simple explanation is companies have learned how to weaken trade unions, and that's what increased the inequalities. But there's also a possibility that It's other forces, for example, globalization or the increase of competition with the increase of international trade that actually weakened the trade unions because they were benefiting from a lack of competition. And now there's not this profit as they used to have, and that's what weakened them. And not, and so the inequality would be increased because of that, because the increase of international trade, for example. And the cause is different. But I would say that most likely the trade unions are strengths for equality. Johan, LINDHOLM, do you want to say something?
No. Can you speak closer?
Now I can speak. No. Of course, solidarity, collective bargaining, collective strengthening is the future. It's not old-fashioned. We do it a lot in Sweden, and I do it a lot with also French and all the other European unions. So I think that's the answer for the blue colors to actually be on the field to make this just not an unjust society. It's more justice. So yeah.
Je pense qu'on a le temps.
I believe that we have time for another question. The gentleman here with his hand raised, and I saw another one here as well. We're going to take two questions. Go ahead. Yannick, University of Montpellier, I have a question on the definition that we make of work in the roundtable, because we talk about employees' work. And I think about people who talk about ghost work, so all the work that is done outside of the employee sphere. And since we're talking about the meaning of work, are the younger generations not questioning the relationship between the employees and ghost work rather than work itself? So very interesting question. And not so I don't want you to be completely frustrated, so let's ask you a question as well. And then we'll see in what order we take the questions, knowing that we have 3 minutes left. Hello, I'm wondering the question for the over 50, because there's so many people who are looking for work at 45 and 50, and to make sure that they can enjoy their work as well. They don't have much choice in terms of their options, and that reduces a lot their wage. So what kind of place do you make in your companies? It's the same for people with disability. It is a quite vast question. Can anybody answer one or two of the questions? Question outside of society, shadow work, and workers who are pushed outside of the work sphere because of their age, despite themselves. I'm going to answer to the lady first. You asked the question for the people who are over 50 or people with disability. The real question is, why do we try to get fulfillment from work? Because, as you said, at some point, we must continue to the working to provide for our needs. But fundamentally, if I look back to the image of the pyramid, to make believe that the workplace should be used for fulfillment of oneself is a myth or a lie at best. So we need to completely change the paradigm, and I agree with you. There's a real topic of interest of workers over 50 to keep being engaged in their work and find a work that they like, a job that they like. And this is completely different than fulfillment. We have, we're done. Our time is up. 1 minute. In a few seconds, can somebody go for a conclusion. I would just like to conclude by saying that we cannot tell the unemployed who by definition would like to work, and that they should change their mind and valorize the job that they've lost, and their revenue and their wage. Everybody had a chance to say what they want. Thank you to all of you, and thank you for being here in the room. Thank you.